everyone. It looks like our attendee list has slowed down a little bit with some of our joins, but if some folks do join late, it shouldn't be a big issue. So welcome to our third quarterly virtual listening tour of the Connecting Michigan Taskforce. My name is Eric Frederick. I am the Executive Director of Connected Nation Michigan, and we work with several different state agencies, including the MEDC, to facilitate the Connecting Michigan Taskforce. So today, this is very similar to past virtual listening tours. We want to provide an update to you on what's going on with broadband at the federal level and in the state, as well as get your questions and ideas about how to improve broadband in Michigan. So again, we have our two purposes today. The first is to provide you with information about what's going on with broadband, like I said, as well as the Connecting Michigan Task Force and everything going on with broadband, especially since COVID has has really brought broadband to the forefront of everyone's minds. But then the second purpose, again, is to listen to your broadband related challenges and questions and issues that you're having so that we can help identify solutions and resources to those. So I'm going to give a brief presentation on those things that I just mentioned. And so during that time, please go ahead and submit questions and comments using that Q&A function of Zoom while I present that information. So there should be a Q&A button in your Zoom taskbar or menu bar. Go ahead and use that to submit questions and comments and ideas and thoughts for our discussion that'll happen here in probably the next 15 to 20 minutes or so. When we get to that discussion, then we'll have a nice backlog of questions and comments to address, and then we'll unmute those that submitted those questions and comments, and we can start a discussion from there. So as you're thinking about those questions and comments, think about what's working with broadband, what's not, how can we improve broadband in Michigan, and what do you need, whether you're an ISP or a community or a school, what do you need to help improve broadband in your community? So a little bit of background. The Connecting Michigan Task Force was established last year as a partnership between Connected Nation Michigan and the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, and is an interagency working group with representatives from these 14 state agencies. Again, it's interagency, so the purpose of this group is to really better coordinate broadband activity among these state agencies. There's so much going on now with broadband and digital literacy and digital inclusion and affordability related to broadband that we wanted to make sure that state agencies were coordinating those activities, and this is the opportunity to do that. This group also collectively advocates for Michigan broadband at a federal level. So we watch what the federal agency counterparts are doing with broadband. We watch what funding sources are out there and really advocate for those at those entities for Michigan. And then finally, the group reviews plans and recommendations to improve Michigan's broadband ecosystem. Those could be recommendations from the 2018 Michigan Broadband Roadmap or recommendations from the federal government or so on. So this group, again, is an interagency working group with representatives from these 14 different state agencies. Just a quick primer to make sure we're all on the same page about where we are with broadband in Michigan. This infographic describes the different technologies that are used to deliver broadband. Fixed wireless broadband, cable, fiber, and DSL are considered fixed terrestrial broadband. So these are your permanent connections for home, businesses, institutions, and communities. Mobile broadband is, of course, the service that connects your smartphone and is designed for on-the-go use from one place to another. Although we do know that a lot of folks use mobile broadband as their permanent home internet connection, likely because these other options aren't available. Now, satellite broadband is another one that has traditionally been in the realm of a last resort type option. However, that's changing with new advances in low Earth orbit technology, and we can discuss that at the end if there's those that are interested in that. But satellite broadband, of course, is a non-terrestrial option as it brings that signal from the edge of space to your home, business, or institution. When we look at this map of broadband service in Michigan, this is a map that shows estimated broadband coverage at 25 by 3 megabits per second, which is the current federal definition of broadband, although that speed definition is starting to change with some of the funding programs that are coming out from particularly the American Rescue Plan from January, and discussions with the new bipartisan infrastructure package that's currently working its way through Congress. But anyway, this is our starting point for now. And so in the green areas on this map, or these are the areas where we estimate broadband service to be available at that speed as of September 1st last year. Just to note, these maps will be updated October 1st of this year. So we'll have brand new maps to share at our next virtual listening tour session. You notice that there's two areas of green estimated service areas on this map. The dark green areas represent where internet service providers have provided us with more detailed information about the service areas that they cover, compared to the less granular information that they give to the FCC. The light green areas are those areas where we have to rely on FCC data instead to show where we estimate coverage to be available. But all in all, the green areas again represent that estimated service coverage, and the white areas then, of course, are those areas where we estimate that service at 25/3 is not available. When we look at data from the census, we estimate about 1.25 million households in Michigan do not have a fixed terrestrial broadband connection at home. Now, this is not simply due to lack of availability or access, but also issues of affordability, lack of a device, smartphone dependence, or simply not seeking out an internet connection or not having it available. So again, 1.25 million households in Michigan do not currently have access to or subscribe to a fixed terrestrial broadband connection for a myriad of reasons. Again, it could be lack of availability, but it could also be affordability, lack of a device, or otherwise. So this paints a picture of where we are in Michigan and the challenges that we're up against. I want to give an update on some of the federal programs that are happening right now to address broadband. The first is the Emergency Broadband Benefit, and this directly impacts the affordability of broadband. This was a program that was passed in the COVID relief bill that passed in December of last year, and it provides a $50 per month discount on home internet service for eligible households. And those eligible households are those that already qualify for Lifeline, so low-income households, those with a student on the free reduced lunch program, federal Pell Grant recipients, households that have experienced a substantial loss of income since February 29th of 2020, or those that are already eligible for a participating ISP's existing low-income programs, such as Internet Essentials from Comcast, Access from AT&T, or Spectrum Internet Assist. This program, we've seen about 178,000 households in Michigan participate in this program since it launched in May, but there are certainly many other households in the state that are eligible for this program. We have a number of internet service providers in Michigan that are participating in this program. And there's a link here, and I will send this presentation out to everyone afterwards, so you can have the link, all these live URLs to check out this information. But we want to keep promoting this program among eligible households because it is such a substantial discount on home internet service to overcome that affordability barrier. Again, households need to determine their eligibility by using this link here. And the FCC has published a number of materials to help organizations spread the word about this program. So if you represent a library, a school, a nonprofit organization, or any other entity that comes in contact with those that might qualify for this program, I highly encourage you to check out these communications materials that the FCC has published and help spread the word about this Emergency Broadband Benefit Program. And again, you can find the ever-evolving list of participating providers on the FCC's website here. And again, I will send all of this out afterwards. So everybody has these live links. The other program I want to bring your attention to, and I know this has been in the news a lot, and so many of you are likely familiar with this, but the local fiscal recovery funds that were part of the American Rescue Plan from January is a substantial investment in local units of government to receive COVID relief funds to address a myriad of issues related to the pandemic at the local level. And broadband is one of those eligible expenses for these fiscal recovery funds. I'm not going to go into details of all of these because you can find this information for yourself. If you represent a county, a tribal entity, or a larger municipality in the state, you have to request those funds from the U.S. Treasury directly. And I know that a lot of counties in the state have already done that. However, if you represent a non-entitlement community, those funds need to be appropriated by the Michigan legislature before non-entitlement communities can access these funds. And non-entitlement communities are typically townships, villages, and smaller cities across the state. So the US Treasury has allocated those funds to the state, but the Michigan legislature still needs to appropriate those funds. So again, if you represent a non-entitlement community, and again, that's most townships, most small cities and villages, make sure to contact your Michigan legislator to ensure that those fiscal recovery funds get appropriated and you can have access to them. So here is a summary of all of the federal activity related to broadband and the funding that's currently going on. So we've already talked about the emergency broadband benefit and the state and local fiscal recovery funds. Those are open and being appropriated and available to access now. The Emergency Connectivity Fund is a program administered by the FCC. They had an initial round of that fund, but had funds remaining. And they are opening a round 2 of applications for $2.1 billion that are left in funds to support home connectivity through schools and libraries. So only schools and libraries are allowed to apply for this fund, and they are taking those applications until September 28th. I'm sorry, the window opens September 28th. And there will be a link here again in this presentation when I send it around. Another program is the USDA's Emergency Rural Healthcare Grant. This is a grant program to help healthcare institutions as well as provide economic relief to rural communities. And so there's kind of 2 different tracks that this grant follows, and they are taking applications until October 12th. Another program is the EDA's Build Back Better Regional Challenge. This is a $1 billion competitive program where regions can apply for economic transformation. So those initial letters of interest and broader project plans are due October 19th. So if you represent a region or you're part of a region that could go after that program, I believe they're going to be giving awards anywhere from $20 to $30 million. So it's a good size program that the EDA is operating. The NTIA was just running 2 different grant programs. One was a public-private partnership infrastructure grant program, and the other was a tribal connectivity program. You can see the size of those funds here. For example, the infrastructure grant was only $288 million, and they received $2.5 billion in requests. And the tribal connectivity grant was just under $1 billion, and they received $5 billion in requests. So the NTIA is going to be making those decisions on those grant awards here pretty soon. I don't envy those who have to make those decisions because that's a lot of requests for a relatively small amount of money. When it comes to broadband. We did have several applicants for those programs from Michigan, which is great. So we're hoping a lot of those funds can come to the state. The USDA, we're still waiting on the Reconnect program, which is a rural infrastructure program to be announced. And it's estimated that there'll be $1.3 billion for that program here opening up in 2021. The Capital Projects Fund for State is a state-based program, but we're still waiting on US Treasury guidance for what those programs can fund. And that should be posted from Treasury any day now. But that's a program states will develop a plan for and apply for their allocation. Michigan has been allocated $250 million in that program. And then finally, the bipartisan infrastructure package, which is still pending in Congress. It was passed by the Senate. It's now in the House. And in the Senate version of that bill, there was approximately $42 billion for broadband deployment. Each state is likely to get either a block grant or an allocation of that $42 billion to then administer to deploy broadband in areas that meet the eligibility for that program, however that shakes out when it's finally passed into law. There was also $2 billion for digital equity in that package. So looking at ways to address affordability and devices and digital literacy, and an extension of that emergency broadband benefit program that we just talked about. So there's a big opportunity coming with this bipartisan infrastructure package, but we just have to wait and see what happens as it makes its way through the House. I wish I had more of an update on the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. This was an auction that happened late last year to deploy $363 million in Michigan to serve 250,000 households in the state over the next 6 years. So this is a program that's run by the FCC, and their subsidy dollars come from the Universal Service Fund. The green and orange areas on the map of Michigan here represent areas that received funds for that program and can expect build out over the next 6 years. Unfortunately, the FCC has been slow to approve a lot of the final applications for providers who participated in this program. So we're still waiting on those funds to get approved and released so that providers who did win funds in that auction can start building to these areas. A few updates from the state side. The Connecting Michigan Communities Grant Program, or CMIC, is the state's own grant program for broadband infrastructure. Round 2 grant awards were announced back in July, but another grant application window opened this week. So I highly encourage you, if you're an internet service provider, to check out the link here. If you're a community, even though communities can't apply for the grant, they can certainly work with internet service providers to identify areas that might be eligible for this grant. And again, that grant application window, opened up this week and will run for 60 days. The Michigan Infrastructure Council's Dig Once project portal is a project that opened earlier this year and is a great way for infrastructure asset owners. So anyone who owns, maintains, or operates infrastructure in the state, whether it's water, sewer, broadband, telecom, electric, whatever it is, they can document and coordinate infrastructure and utility work in the right-of-way. So this is a great way for right-of-way projects to be entered and dig once opportunities for all infrastructure owners to get in the right-of-way when those right-of-ways are under construction. So we can minimize disruption to the right-of-way. So that's here at michigan.gov/NIC. And then finally, Governor Whitmer announced the creation of the Michigan High-Speed Internet Office back in June. It's going to be housed in the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity and led by a chief connectivity officer. Myself and my Connected Michigan team are currently working with Leo to help establish that office and develop plans and goals and all sorts of things for that office and get it up and running so that it can be effective as Governor Whitmer has intended. So look for more information on that here in the very near future. So now we've come to our questions. So go ahead and please use that Q&A button to submit questions and comments that we can work to address. I've put some of the common issues related to broadband up here just to spark any issues that you might be experiencing in your communities. Access, of course, is issues related to the physical infrastructure, either wired or wireless. So availability, low household density, data caps, competition, installation costs, what have you. Adoption, of course, is related to things like affordability and access to devices and digital literacy. And then use is how we're using these applications to improve quality of life, whether it's telehealth, virtual learning, or telework, or a whole host of other things that you can do with the internet to improve quality of life. So if you haven't submitted a question or a comment already, please go ahead and do that. I'm going to start going through the ones that have been submitted. Let's see. We have a question here about how rural broadband is being implemented where cable is impractical. That's a really good question. Household density, as it declines, as you move further and further into rural areas of the state, does make it difficult for more wired options to be expanded there, simply due to economics. So there are a lot of solutions being implemented in rural communities that are implementing wireless solutions, so fixed wireless, mobile wireless, or where we've seen partnerships between public and private entities come together to deploy wired options that starts to change the economics of these rural areas and does make wired options more easy to deploy. Where previously, if a private entity or a public entity were trying to do it on their own, it might not be as economic or viable. So looking at partnerships as a way to do that, looking at new technologies as a way to expand broadband into rural areas are a lot of the solutions that we're looking at for expanding into rural areas. Let's see. Ryan, would you go ahead and unmute Julie for me? And she can ask her question about the EBB.
Hi, I could probably ask this at a federal level, but I just wondered if you happen to know, for a family, we are an EBB approved, participant as an internet service provider. And the two districts where we provide internet, both of them provide free lunch to all children. And therefore, I wondered if our families with K-12 children would automatically apply for the EBB benefit. Do you happen to know?
I don't happen to know that, but I believe that one of my contacts at the Michigan Public Service Commission might know that. So that's something that I can follow up on and get back to you and get back to this group on, because I think it's a very relevant question for many others as well. So I will dig into that and I will get back to you and this group with an answer on that one.
Thanks.
Yep. All right. Just read through here real quick. Yep, Ryan, could you unmute Jamie Keeley to ask their question?
Yes, good morning. I was just curious, when you're talking about mapping FCC data and ISP data, if you're doing any kind of crowdsourcing possibly, or if you're asking residents maybe what their true experience is to understand where the true gaps are instead of relying on the FCC data.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And that community level data is absolutely critical for helping better understand, overstatement, understatement of the FCC data and get a better picture of what's going on at a local level. So I do know that through the community engagement work that Connected Michigan has done, I know Merit Network does a lot of community engagement along the same lines of, doing surveys and getting speed tests and asking about experience with, trying to get to that more granular level is really critical for community planning. It can help those local community efforts. Whether it influences the FCC maps or not, I think remains to be seen. I don't know that there's a very solid mechanism for doing that. But yes, it's certainly something that several entities in the state are doing, and it really does help, I think, that community planning effort when it comes to trying to determine, the true areas of unserved in communities on the ground.
Thank you.
Another question here is about Starlink. So let's get this back to the satellite discussion that we had earlier. So Starlink is a low Earth orbit satellite system that is being implemented by Elon Musk's company and SpaceX. There we go. I couldn't think of the name for a second. And it is being beta tested in a lot of northern communities in Michigan. I don't know exactly where, which communities are or are not part of that beta test. I know that you can go to Starlink's website and sign up to get notified when it's available in your area. But the initial reports that I've seen for their deployment in Michigan has been in more of the northern areas of the state. So I would, if you are interested in that technology, I would check out their website, see if it's currently available in your location or in your community. And then, like I said, you can sign up for updates to be notified when it is available. All right. We had another question here about what types of emerging technology are surfacing. Currently, some of the things that are on the maybe not on the cutting edge, but at least things that are developing include the low Earth orbit satellite systems, being able to bring that signal closer to the Earth. Certainly, latency of that network, where the time it takes for a signal to get from your internet service provider up to space to your house and then back again is definitely something that's being improved through that low Earth orbit satellite system. There are a number of different entities that are working on that. SpaceX is probably the most notable at the moment, but there are definitely others. Like I said, their system is still in beta test. It'll be interesting to see how that program scales once they open it up for availability across the country or even just across a single state. So that's one. 5G mobile, of course, is something that we've all heard about in the news, and something that's been developed in countries around the world. It is being deployed in Michigan. It's being deployed in a lot of our more major cities at the moment. And so hopefully that technology starts to advance and improve mobile broadband across all of the state, and not just in those higher concentration urban areas. So 5G, of course, is one of those technologies that are out there. TV white space is another wireless technology that takes advantage of dead space in broadcast television spectrum, so that in rural areas that don't have access to broadcast television or as many broadcast television channels, they can reuse that spectrum instead for broadband. So that's been tested in a couple places in Michigan to differing effects, but that is one other technology that are out there. And if any of you know of others that I'm missing, go ahead and put those in the comments as well, because again, it's tough to stay on top of all of it as wireless and wired technology continues to be upgraded and changed. Ryan, would you unmute the Lapeer Township account to ask their question? Can you hear us?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I think you're still muted. You can unmute yourself. Okay, well, looks like we're having some issues unmuting that one. So let me take a look at the question here and see if I can summarize it real quick. Everyone talks about partnering and new technologies to bring broadband, but how do you find ISPs and other entities interested in build out, and specifically build out in your area? There are a township of 5,000, so many of our residents still have no reliable internet access. Any fixed wireless that comes into our area fills up immediately, so that's a capacity issue there. So how can communities find those ISPs that are willing to partner? I think that's a really good question. I think it's definitely something that we want to look at as a state and see if there's an opportunity to do some of that matchmaking. We have a lot of internet service providers in Michigan. When Connected Nation Michigan maps broadband, we reach out and contact over 150 residential internet service providers. So that doesn't even count those that only serve businesses or only do long haul fiber across the state. So we have a lot of internet service providers in Michigan. And so I think there's an opportunity to better matchmake between communities that are looking for a partner, and that have the capacity to start addressing their broadband challenges and bring something to that partnership. And then of course, those ISPs that are willing to do that partnership. So I think there's an opportunity there to be more proactive in supporting those partnerships as a state. In fact, that was a recommendation of the 2018 Michigan Broadband Roadmap. And that could be something that is brought to the attention of the new MyHigh office. Is that a function that the MyHigh office could help perform and look at ways to better facilitate partnerships between communities and ISPs? So I don't have a great answer for you now, but again, I think that's a great topic to bring up because it's something that we hear not just from Lapeer Township, but other places as well. That there's an interest from ISPs, there's an interest from communities. So how do we bring those two groups together to solve those challenges? All right, I don't see any other questions coming through, but feel free to go ahead and do that. What I'm going to do is I move on to the next one that has some resources for you. We have lots of information and resources available on our website, connectednation.org/Michigan. We have a list of all of the current funding opportunities that are out there. We have access to our maps. We have access to lists of ISPs. We have access to policy documents and data. So please go ahead and use that information. If you don't see something on there that you think should be there, please let us know as well. We want to make sure that that's a place where we have all of the resources and information available. Like I said, the Connecting Michigan Taskforce is a partnership with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. They do a monthly broadband newsletter that, again, includes breaking news on new funding sources, stories about what's going on in Michigan when it relates to broadband. We also do host webinar series, and we record podcasts with various folks. So all of that content comes through that newsletter. So I highly encourage you to sign up for that newsletter if you're not already. Our virtual listening tours are quarterly. So our next session will be in early December. It would be great if I had news about a bipartisan infrastructure package to share at that next session. So fingers crossed that gets moving through Congress, and we can start planning for the use of those funds to impact broadband in Michigan. So keep that in mind. You'll get an invitation and outreach about that next virtual listening tour as well. Let's do one last check. The last question we got here was about encouraging municipal build out. So Michigan is one of those states that does not outright ban municipal broadband, but there are several steps that need to be taken to do that. I think there's some really good examples of municipal broadband in Michigan. So it is definitely an option for a lot of places, or maybe an option. But the Michigan Telecommunications Act outlines the steps that need to happen for a community to go that route. So I would highly recommend checking out the Michigan Telecommunications Act if that's a route, or start talking to some of the communities that have done it. There are several around the state that have gone that route with varying degrees of success. So I would definitely look to reach out to them, look at the MTA, see what their experience was, and if that's a route for the community, fantastic. Again, Michigan does not outright ban municipal networks, but there are some hoops that need to be jumped through per the Michigan Telecom Act. So I would definitely highly encourage looking out for that. So that looks like all of our questions. Again, I'm going to follow up on the question about the EBB about an entire school district being eligible, because they all qualify for the free reduced lunch program. So I'll look into that. And when I send out this newsletter, I'll try to answer that question if I have a response by then from either the Public Service Commission or the FCC. So I will do my best to find that answer, because I think that's really relevant for a lot of school districts in the state. So again, thank you for joining us today. Look for our next virtual listening tour in early December. We have 3 more sessions this week. They're all the same. I just wanted to provide multiple opportunities for folks to join if one time didn't work for everyone. So again, thank you, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day and a great week. Thanks again.